Welcome back, everybody. It's my pleasure to be sitting here for this chat with Chief Chris Roberts from the Weebecome Nation. Hi, Chris.
Yeah, hi, Dallas. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is an interesting time in, First Nations politics, UNDRIP, aquaculture, old growth, everything that's going on at home. There's just lots of opportunities with challenges in front of them. And one of the things I was hoping to do in this discussion with you is just kind of walk through what's it like for a chief councillor in today's conditions with some of the various topics that our viewers are going to be interested about. This is the Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference. I know you played a small role in it when the tables were turned and you actually worked for me. But now I work for you. It doesn't seem to be as easy to ask you the questions I thought I was going to be able to ask you, being that you're on the board of directors that oversees the organization that I run on your behalf. But all fun and jokes aside, Chris and I have been dear friends for, 20 years now. We both come from families that have been politically engaged and involved, and it's really nice to have you here to get your hands-on perspective. You've been chief councillor for
3.5 years.
3.5 years now, and you've been through a gamut of things. So let's talk about energy.
Okay.
Myra Falls is the only mine in British Columbia not on the power grid. I think you'll remember during your time as our Regional Economic Development Officer where we had some ideas around that. So maybe just give me some of your thoughts on Myra and where you're looking to plug your nation's interests in.
Okay, that's probably a good place to start. Thanks, Dallas. There's so many areas to cover, right? So in looking at Myra Falls, it's a mine that's operated in the territory, shared with Weebecome predominantly, all within the Kelm River watershed, so squarely within liquid tidal lands. And it's been operating since, the 60s, right? So an era of the First Nations consultation consent non-existent. Interesting fact about this one is their offload terminal is situated on our reserve lands on a land lease that's been rolled over with the 4 different owners of the mine over the years. And so, to put it plain and simply, with the most recent mine manager, and I have a bit of a running joke where the mine goes through mine managers more than we happen to go through band managers. So, and I'll circle back to that as far as challenges we face as Indigenous communities to run our administrations. But I said, simply put, my people do not want this mine to continue. It went into care and maintenance for a while, and I think there was some excitement and buzz that it might actually be wound up, reclaimed, and shut down. Because we want to see the terminal reclaimed, it was never part of a planning. It's right beside our community, so we have concerns of impacts of, I've learned some terminology over the last several months of we've been in heavy engagement of things like fugitive dust and deleterious substances that are a product or byproduct of the operation. So I've learned a lot about mining and working with Nanwakolas Council and other colleagues. I'm supportive of the mine industry. For one, this one's easy. The hole's already there. The damage is done. But there's no benefits to my community. There's no benefits to any Indigenous community. So we kick those doors open to say, this doesn't make sense. I think it's the last remaining mine in the province with no resource revenue sharing agreement. We're advancing those discussions right now with the province. And I think it might be one of the last mines operating that is off-grid. And it's only 48 kilometers from a substation of a network of 3 hydroelectric dams. So technically feasible. Economics aren't quite there. I'm not giving up on it yet, though, because there are assets that the mine has upstream for run of the river, small hydroelectric, and that's fantastic. But let's face it, they have a high energy consumption and their generators are always running. I was up there 2 days ago, and they, this time of year, they've got full water capacity, and I can see on their little computer control room that they're running 2 generators to operate the mill. So feel free to cut me off at any time because I could go down a rabbit hole of what's entailed here, but in summary, no benefits to my community for this mine operating. We want to be involved as decision makers in the reclamation plan. We're open to working with all the other nations in the region of how that is achieved. And The previous session was on procurement. And so negotiating an agreement, which it seems awkward. I think the foreign, the international company that owns this, they liken it to sort of blackmail or that we're holding hostage these permits and stuff, but it's the only leverage we've got to get a seat at the table as a decision maker in guiding how this mine will continue. And I hope they find more ore deposits so it can operate for another 20 years. That'd be great for the community.
Well, and that's an interesting subject, because there's so many concerns that come into it from your point of view. There's the lost economic opportunity that's not being realized with your community. You just stated that it's in the Campbell River watershed, so there's concerns about the diesel being trucked up there, obviously. And UNDRIP and DRIPA and things like that don't mean anything to these foreign nationals, and that's a challenge that we have. So I'm really happy to hear that you're continuing those dialogues, and I know I'm involved a little bit on the outside from the point of how can we find solutions to bring some of those things together. I know that you guys have looked at possibly building a power line for them because of some of the opportunities that you have with Aboriginal rights and title in protected areas. The one thing that we haven't said is this mine is in the middle of one of the oldest parks in British Columbia.
The oldest, biggest provincial park, yeah.
Yeah, so it obviously limits the development potential around it, but I know that you and our folks at C3 who have helped us run this conference have put together a very attractive proposal around building a power line, a low impact power line from the substation through the penstock back into the mine, so they don't have to depend on diesel that's in your watershed. I guess my next question about it would be, is that one of the reasons why you're training guardians and monitors and stewards for your nation, so you can keep an eye on this with your own eyes and your own ears?
Absolutely. And if we're going to go to that level of things with the role of stewardship and guardians, that's across the board, right? That's any sector we're talking about: agriculture, mining, forestry. And I'd heard it said when I worked at Nanwakolas that we far outpaced the days of a consultation framework and a paperwork exercise, a desktop, looking at traditional use studies, looking back at history of why certain parts of our territory are important. Don't get me wrong, that's the starting place. But as we go forward, what type of future plans do we have? And so these referrals come across our desk, or these consultation things that want to happen. Hey, we'd like to reactivate this mine from care and maintenance. What do you think? It's like, so you sit around a boardroom of elected councillors and a chief, and the best things we can come up with. We're moving beyond that to having a resource of our own staff, our own people that are on the front lines of resource management, active participation in it. So we can walk down the hall and say, hey, actually, we're doing the water quality monitoring on a regular basis here. Let's get a brief from our people on if they feel confident that we're on top of things, and we can make an informed decision on a pathway towards a consent-based model, recognizing the decision-making authority and title of the rightful title holders.
It's interesting that you bring that up from, the world starts with a referral, and so it seems sometimes. And the role of First Nations in making sure that we can bring all of our values to the table around protection, management, and sustainability, but also still keep that discussion open for equity partnerships, for job creation, for skills training. You come from a little bit of a different background than the chiefs of yesterday did. You were sent to school specifically to come home and be a leader. How do you think that has what position do you think that's put you in as a young leader? You're culturally grounded. You and I, practice our culture together from time to time, and it's ironic that I'm older than you, but you're teaching me in some of those things, and that's, I think, one of the great things about our friendship is, just the back and forth we have about the vast arrays of being Indigenous, and both of us having that growing up, not outside of the Indigenous community, but decisions were made for us to put us in leadership roles. And so now that you reflect back on that, I know you like going fishing. I know we had a problem when you worked for us that you would take a sick day to go commercial fishing from time to time.
I hope Merv's not watching.
Yeah, I hope Merv's not watching. Do you miss just being a fisherman, or are you glad that your parents and grandparents decided that you were going to be a circuit breaker? You were going to be a change in where you can be educated, you can be cultural, and you still can work for your people. What's some of your thoughts on that?
Wow, there's a lot within that, right? And when I was on my way here, I thought, I'll try not to talk about myself too much, but that's really inviting. And so, first of all, I think, what is it? It creates a challenge because of expectations. You know, I've got an undergraduate degree in economics, so I don't call myself an economist, but I know how economists think and the framework. They call it one methodology of analysis of what might happen. Anyhow, that raises expectations of my people and then words, right? It's like, oh, economics, business, economic development, they're interrelated, but they're definitely different. We just talk about business development and procurement. And I've learned a lot through managing several MBAs and research projects through the Sauder School of Business and partnerships we've done there. So I kind of got my hard knocks along the way of, the business analysis end of things. But to your question is, I think, I go back to my great-grandfather, Bill Roberts, one of the second of an elected chief for the Weewakam people. And he was wanted to go off and fight in the war, and he was too young, and so he got held over in England and went to school there and finished high school. Had the name changed from Quoxie Stala to Roberts. And that was the beginning of the insight to what education would mean to Indigenous people. And he was very adamant about that and instilled it. And he has a reputation to this day of taking that Western white man education system to use it to support and advance Indigenous people's communities. And he did that a lot on the island with supporting servicing agreements, getting reserve communities built. And so that has continued, and that was very much like, literally I had tears all the time because all I really wanted to do was be a fisherman. It's in our blood. I maintain that pre-contact, old days, our people didn't just run around with all this abundance of resources and harvesting and doing whatever you felt like. Everyone had specific roles, and I feel firmly that because of the skill that's transcended over generations in commercial fisheries, that was largely part of the lineage of my family. So it's in my blood. My son's name is Fisher. And that was, obviously very deliberate. And I want him to be able to be a commercial fisherman and be successful at it. But that is totally needs to flip on its head. And this is my personal, it's taken a long time because we were successful, particularly my family, in participating in the industrial commercial fishery. We were good at it. Of course we would. All Indigenous people on the coast were. The tides, and the commercial sector, industrial sector was built off of our backs. Economic consequences of colonialism see us sit on the shorelines and not having assets that are worth something in the capital world. A classification of an Indian license that can't be sold or trade except for another Indian. Meanwhile, someone can't exercise their fishing rights one year because their boat's broken down or burned. We're going to lose that halibut quota. Now there's these armchair fishermen quota holders that we come to almost begging to fish for lease prices at always $2 a pound. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's near and dear to my heart. It is the economic consequences of colonialism, I call it, and it's rife through the commercial fishing sector. Mm-hmm. And now, what fish? Right, we have my hats off to the North Coast and the agreement on the reconciliation of a huge mandate from the government to reclaim their stake in fisheries. We're at a table similar to that with several other nations, also belonging to the Alligator Fisheries Society and also belonging to Nanwakolas Council. Our emphasis is, sure, we want resources and money to purchase licenses and regain our position. But without the resource management piece, without decision-making responsibility, and it's I don't know if it's a privilege, that's the difference of a value set from a Western colonial value set of private property resources, a privilege of what I can do, it's my decision, versus this is my obligation bestowed to me from the Creator of the place we come to be in the world, and the value set is such that it needs to continue for generations that will never meet, that seventh generation model. And so we have a lot of work to do to repair degradation and harm from all types of things, and add layers of climate change. It's like, holy smokes. Maybe aquaculture, maybe don't go too far, because you guys might have a role to play in how we bring this all back. So I'll just kind of stop there for a sec.
And that's such a great segue. You've had some challenging positions early in your mandate, and thankfully you've got some experience from working with us, your education, but you're also part of the Aboriginal internship program, the first class actually by the provincial government, ironically, the second class. My wife was involved in that program as well, which is a little bit of a weird thing how, everything interacts and comes together. But I've watched you take on these challenges, and let's talk about aquaculture for a minute. Aquaculture is a very contentious word. It's very hard for us to say it, so I'm going to say it again. Aquaculture. The world didn't stop. There was no flicker of the lights. But it's a challenge that's out there, and you've had to embrace that. We watched from the outside the Broughton decision, where the Broughton Nations made it very clear that they were not for that in their territory anymore. And that moved down towards Discovery Islands. And you were put in a challenging position, were you not? There was a couple farms that a company came to you with, and you worked out a benefit sharing agreement and some of the other things along with it. But it wasn't just about the money. Why did you enter into the partnership that you did to support OneGrow cycle for 2 sites?
To control the outcome, to be in the driver's seat, is the most straightforward answer I can give, and that's how we achieved, I think, unanimous support from the council. It was a lot of deliberations on, is this the right thing to do? But in the end, we determined that because of conditions put on the table for this to continue on a short-term basis without any long-term commitments, that we wanted a Broughton-like experience too. We wanted investment to be able to work with our Guardian program that's established, which is already doing, I would say, a basic level of monitoring of the farm sites. We were just starting to, and we still will, get that going. Higher thresholds for sea lice and stuff. And the bottom. So I just want to preface this before I start talking about aquaculture that for me, I haven't made up my mind, and it's not just my decision. As elected leader, very cognizant of taking direction from the people, and admittedly, something I think I personally, as a council, we need to do a better job at engaging our members and seeking the mandate. But we are elected to do a job, and we're on the front lines of it to ask the questions. Anyhow, the feedback loop needs to be tightened up a bit. So we stick our neck out a bit to say, for one, we were like, holy smokes, they said yes to it all. Wow, we didn't expect that. And that includes, commitments around, like, let's put some realness and commitment around sustainable methods, maybe new technologies, such as closed containment, semi-closed containment, and the list goes on. I haven't done all of my own homework on the reams of literature that exist on sort of the debate or the bun fight of science, of government regulation in science, of environmental and activist positions in science. To me, it seems that they're almost foregone conclusions. Like, they've made up their mind and will go and seek data to reaffirm our position, and not coming at it with an open mind of to understand what's going on. So I kind of got tired of the debate never evolved. Mm-hmm. It just continued, and it was the same. And so I did have to do some of my own homework, and I also want to should have prefaced this with what wild salmon mean to coastal First Nations people, or all First, in river. It's our identity without salmon is unimaginable, really. So I've said earlier, all the different factors that contribute to the decline of wild salmon is very scary. So we proceed with a lot of caution. Is open net salmon farming of Atlantics going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? I don't know. A lot of information says no, we're not the sole culprits, and look over here. But we, as an Indigenous coastal people, I don't think any of us would ever, if we had the proof there, or those were our convictions, we wouldn't go down that pathway. And my hat's off to a lot of nations that have done that. I'm not going to tell them how to do their business. I'm not going to go and comment on agreements that are in place in the Central Coast, where they've been for years, with marine harvest in Maui and the Kitasuheihe. That's their business. It's their tidal areas, their tidal waters, and they've got something, and I respect that. And in other jurisdictions where it happens. In our case, as your dad put it once, we have less elbow room down in our neck of the woods among Kwakwaka'wakw and us Liquito people, and where it transitions down to the Salish groups, a little more hemmed in. And so as far as territorial shared areas, so it was like classic government move to throw us all in a pool and lump us together, and that created a whole nother aspect of this that we didn't belong. And you guys work it out. Meanwhile, so I don't want to wander off too much there, but that was really what complicated the whole situation.
Well, maybe just to pick up on that, I mean, as you know, I was a little bit involved behind the scenes in some of the discussions that put you in a position to support this grow out cycle. But for you and your nation, it became clear to me that this was the ability to fight other fights, to take a regional ecosystem-based management approach to saying, these are all the things that are happening in my yard right now. This deal will give me the capacity to at least better understand those things. You talked about the bun fight between activist science, industry science, government science. You made it clear you wanted to do your own. And that's something that I think is still going on today in your acquisition of science capacity. So you can do your own science and know what informed decisions you and your community, like you so eloquently brought up, need to make. And I think that's really a story that didn't get told in the whole for or against aquaculture thing, was your strive towards self-determination around informing yourself and the science capacity that you need to build so you can manage life levels, ISN, IHN, whatever, and HN numerals Alexandra Morton's throwing at us lately around these issues. That's great if those are out. Well, it's not great that those are out there, but we need to understand those and understand those impacts, because you're also doing work around salmon restoration in your discussions with Western Forest Products, are you not?
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. I think if there's a main theme or a message I want to give, and maybe this touches a little bit on the question of how do we ensure that development is done sustainably. And we have to be informed with our own data and have reliance on that, and that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to evolve, like all cultures evolve and adapt. So if it's the fundamental values of an Indigenous stewardship lens, and what the value set is embedded within our ancient laws of respect for the Creator's creations, don't take too much, use what you take, etc. There are words in all of our languages for these principles and these laws. And if those can be the foundation of how we participate in modern science, if that's the right way to put it, it's just being on the front lines and active participants in resource management decisions. And so there's a real opportunity. And you're right with respect to the aquaculture situation, Discovery Islands. That's something that was a bit of it was a missed opportunity for that moment in time, but we're not letting go of that. Examples I use were back when I was at Nanwakolas, we had all these sectors at a regional economic strategy, and we struggled with what to call. We're looking at fisheries, and seafood, and aquaculture, and we lumped those underneath a banner of sustainable seafood production. We all agreed that was a goal, and that was a cornerstone of our identity as marine and coastal people, yet we're all in favor of that. We're some of the first aquaculturists in the world with our lokiwe and the clam gardens, and that's shared up this whole coast. And so there's a lot of very sustainable methods of aquaculture. There's, kelp and seaweed aquaculture that are coming into it. I was a big fan of this IMTA, integrated multi-trophic thing. Well, that sounds pretty cool. I haven't really seen it play out in a commercial scale, profitable situation yet. But to do any of these things, or even to look at forestry and to have confidence as our obligation to, that I talked about earlier, of how we manage our territories, what are we relying upon? Reams of reports from a panel of people that we had no involvement in checking, or don't even know who they are, myself, and they're going to release a report on areas that I should defer for old growth in my territory? I'll take that under consideration. But we're doing our own work on that. We are investing in LiDAR technology. We are working with forest companies and we have boots on the ground in the woods marking large cultural cedar trees and other future trees that will one day be suitable for a canoe. And why are other people always trying to tell us how to do our business? That's the most frustrating part as a leader, is that we're not taken seriously. I said we're engaged on something around shared decision making and consent-based models, and how is the government going to roll out implementation of the Declaration Act, UNDRIP, DRIPA, whatever. And I said, quit stalling around and engaging us to death and being scared to just hand it over. And you know what? We're not starting from scratch. Give us faith in that as Indigenous leaders, we're going to do the right thing. And it's not going to mean the economy is going to tank. You know, we all live here together. We got to work and share together. But the beneficial owners of those are going to change. Those are going to be Indigenous communities. And the wealth is going to stay in the regions of where we live. Our communities will be better places for it. I think there's just this big hesitation and fear of handing it over back. I don't think that was thought about too much when the settler mentality came and saw these Indians wasting the resources because we weren't using them, you know? And so just take a step back and just hand it over. We'll figure it out and we'll be all good. I'm oversimplifying, but I don't want to spend a decade in negotiations and talks about this stuff because we don't have the time for that.
You know, that brings up a great point around the public pressure or societal license. I don't want to quite use a term that's going to trigger you and put this on the wrong note, but
social acceptability.
Social acceptability. That was the one.
There.
Thank you, Minister Bernadette Jordan. We appreciate you. Former Minister Bernadette Jordan. You know, you've run into some challenges. There's a TFL that got attempted to be renewed in your territory without your consent. And I know you had a lot of options in front of you, but the announcement that Nanwakolas made on its partnership to do lower level planning with Western Forest Products yesterday to both clarify the sustainability of old growth management, our large cultural cedar program, where, like you said, we're identifying large cultural cedar trees that will be used for cultural purposes, from canoe logs to big house construction, et cetera, to the economics that need to be in play there. How tough was it for you not just to get in line, go to court, and then start from scratch? I imagine there's a little bit of a leap of faith there to not litigate and to try work some of these things out. What's some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard decision to make too, because that takes time. I think I was inspired by the progress we're making on being active participants in land use planning. Like, for instance, I sit with Jordan as a technical forestry guy who's doing the landscape reserve design within the Great Bear Rainforest in our territory, and I'm learning a heck of a lot. So it's like, I think there's some instruments here that can get us to where we need to go. Without having to just hit the panic button and say, just stop it all. Because I think a lot of our people want that, and sometimes it just feels like there's so many other pressures. Like, we hear all the time, while we're negotiating a treaty, and I don't know how long we've been in that discussion, there's logging truck after logging truck of old growth cedar heading out of our territory. That's got to stop. I do agree, but I guess I had some optimism and confidence on that, the progressive lines that we're moving ahead on. And I think the licensees coming around to accept the declaration of a large cultural cedar protocol helped give me that faith. Because otherwise, if we don't have a willing dance partner and someone that's going to come to the table in a practical way, in a respectful way, then we don't have a lot of options. And so the courts is where we're going to have to fight these things out. And we're not scared to do that by any means. I think that's, as a relatively younger leader, I'm looking forward to that opportunity where my members will rally behind, and we do go. And so my hat's off to the nations that mobilize their people to take a stand, because they won't be pushed anymore. So that's the threat value to industry, to government. Don't dick us around with all this strung out processes, because we don't have the patience for it. The consequences to our people are too great to not advance it at a quicker pace. So come to the table seriously, come prepared with a mandate to make decisions and make progress.
That's a huge point there, and come with a mandate and actually have something to talk to us about, as opposed to just talking to us for the sake of it, or whether it's a check on the box of consultation. In fact, let's get away from this whole consultative model. I think you were one of the first advocates of that as government started to talk about DRIPA and bringing these things in. And so what we're hearing from this young leader is there's always something to be worked out, and it has to get to that point where you work those issues out, because there's consequences or ramifications that come from that. And long gone are the days of extortion. If you don't do this, we're going to do that. It's simply not that simple anymore. I think, as we've shown in our short 20-minute dialogue, is there's so many levels of the discussions that First Nations are bringing to the table now. But I think tongue-in-cheek to our planning session a couple of weeks ago, where you reminded me to get the old action plan out if people aren't listening. We have a plan to shut down Northern Vancouver Island. We can do it tomorrow. I can do it with 4 school buses. I can shut down Vancouver Island. But we would rather negotiate and talk and let people know where we want to sit. And I think young leaders like yourself are a bit of a tip of the iceberg. While I don't want to get emotional, I think of our brother Curtis, who kind of started us on this path of, it all fits, bro. We just all fit, when he developed that Canada flag that just shows how it all fits. And I think that's kind of an impetus, or something that's driving us into making sure that at least when we're at the table, our time's well spent.
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts going forward? I got about 30 seconds here for you. What's in the future for you and your nation?
A lot of hard work. I think, to be honest, like for any of my people listening to this, it's doubling down on making sure that we bring them along, because I've been told that we work for the people, right? And in today's modern world, there's so many other distractions, right? My cousin, as my cultural leader and mentor, says, just keep thinking like an Indian and you'll be all right. And I know what that means. That means about being true to our values. And so I know this is a resource and economic focus, but for our people, it's around reconciling among ourselves and with our neighbors, and getting more grounded in our cultural identities. We're strong, and don't get me wrong, but it's like that's the front and center thing. That's how we achieve this a balance of what's sustainable, right? And we can be successful in a modern context and have nice cars and houses, etc., and still be authentic and genuine to what it means to be, a self-determining, unique Liquito person, or whatever Indigenous nation you're from. We shouldn't be scared of being successful in that regard. But if we don't have the foundation of how we fit in with names that were given in our customs and our culture, our connections to the place, then we do run the risk of the means to the end changing who we are at the end of the day. So that's why it's, for me, the most important thing that carries through is that is with every child, they understand how they fit in. And that's what I got from our brother Curtis. Mm-hmm. And he understood reconciliation, and he wasn't scared to push the frontier of what it means to connect with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, because there was not a sliver of doubt of his identity, of what it meant to be a proud Indigenous man and leader. So thank you.
I want to thank you, Chris, for being here. As we thought we were going live, this discussion was going to be a lot easier. Chris and I talk like this. I'm not going to lie, sometimes there's a bottle of wine between us as we talk about the issues of the day. But to be able to do this in this virtual context without seeing some of the feedback from the crowd is a challenging thing to do. So I really want to thank you for your time and energy in just helping to share some of that insight, because that's what IROC is about, is how do we share that personal insight that's going to make a difference and make everybody know it's okay to be Indian. That's not the correct term. Don't at me, don't tweet me about that if you just started following me. But again, bro, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Gaelic, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So please make your way back to the agenda tab and select the next session, a keynote presentation from MLA Finn Donnelly, Parliamentary Secretary for Fisheries and Aquaculture.